going to get us started talking about brain injury cases, and those, I think those are particularly hard cases, right? It's hard to prove some of those things.
Right, Sharon, I mean, when you're looking at a head injury, we've learned a lot from NFL football, the CTEs, and you know, how devastating, you know, concussions, numerous concussions can be, and the lifelong effects they can have, especially with regard to, you know, pro athletes, anybody in a car wreck, any type of trauma. And so they're difficult cases to prove. Oftentimes you can't see it. It's not like a shift in the midline when you look at those x-rays or those images where it shows the brain. If there's a shift in the midline, it shows there's a subdural hematoma, or there's some type of pressure on the brain that can be measured. But what if it can't? Similar to the numerous concussions. We'll look at having a neuropsychologist do an evaluation, look at the diagnostic testing, and go through many different forms of testing with the neuropsych evaluation to prove these type cases, because again, there's no broken arm, there's no x-ray or diagnostic study that can show those things. And so we'll rely heavily on the neurologist, neuropsychologist, and in addition to the patient's complaints, whether it be persistent headache, concentration, memory loss, blurred vision, fatigue, all those things that are typically, you know, associated with head trauma. The Alabama Head Injury Foundation, for example, you know, there's been a lot of debate, not recently, but about helmets. Should they be required? And people arguing they shouldn't be. Is, hey, I want to be free. I want to ride my hog wherever I want to, and I get that and go with it. But the problem
America,
is
freedom.
Right, and the issue could be, Sharon, that working with the Alabama Head Injury Foundation, oftentimes with a head injury, no health insurance. Not only is it on your family to take care of you, the state to take care of you, and the Alabama Head Injury Foundation does a great job of trying to find resources for people without insurance to provide the families with sitters to give them a break. And so, yeah, I know you want to be free and ride your motorcycle without a helmet, but if you do suffer a head injury, unable to take care of yourself, it falls on the state and family members to take care of you. So not only are you taking yourself out, but other family members and assets of the state as well. So, you know, there's a public benefit of, you know, keeping people in helmets, not only to protect those people riding, but everyone around you. And they can be costly. You know, when we try in cases and we're proving a brain injury, oftentimes we'll have the diagnostic studies, but when we don't, we rely heavily on expert testimony.
And when you're saying that, that is expensive. Let's bring in Bart Senyard, who is also with Senyard Timberlake and League. You guys, when you take on personal injury cases, how does the client pay for that? How does that work?
Right. So in almost all cases, in every case that our firm handles, our law firm basically fronts the expense of proving the case. And that includes, like Will said, when you have a head injury type case, a lot of times we do have to hire expert witnesses like neurologists or neuropsychologists to examine and test our client to determine what are the effects of this brain injury. And firms like ours, we front all that cost because experts don't work for free, but we only get those costs back if we are able to either settle your case or win the case at trial. So there's no upfront cost to the client whatsoever.
You have to make good analysis of those cases then when you're taking them on, don't you? We
do, and unlike, you know, days in the past, jurors, humans, they're more susceptible to conspiracy theories these days than they used to be. And oftentimes I'll see defense firms say, you know, even though the doctor testified to a reasonable degree of medical probability, this injury was related to the motor vehicle wreck, or this injury was related to the trauma this plaintiff suffered. Oftentimes, a defense attorney in this day and age will say, you know, we're just going to throw a rock at that particular opinion or record and see if one of the jurors, you know, falls for it and says, hey, there's a conspiracy. This doesn't add up. If it doesn't add up, then something must be going on. And we're seeing more and more jurors willing to run down that rabbit hole than we used to. And so, you know, Bart, to try and combat that, you know, we'll bring the doctors, you know, to testify. The plaintiff will testify. But oftentimes, you know, jurors will fall for a conspiracy theory, and they require 100% of proof, not just to their reasonable satisfaction with what the law requires.
And Will, I'd like to point out, one of the very important things we try to do is when we have a case where there is a brain injury, where somebody's just not the same as they used to be, and maybe it doesn't show up on an MRI, what we like to do is bring in family members and close friends of that person, if it goes to trial, to testify about this is how he or she was before this wreck, and this is how she is now. And sometimes that can be more compelling testimony than even a neuropsychologist or neurologist.
Yeah, people who knew him, then to see the difference, I'm sure it's heartbreaking.
Right, the age of the plaintiff oftentimes comes in. A lot of families deal with dementia and all those things that are just horrific when you hear people talk about, when a family member doesn't recognize you, what all you have to go through to not only take care of your loved one, but go through the emotional, scarring and damage of your mother, father not knowing you. We had a case, this is a while back, but you remember the Who, the band, the Who?
Yeah.
It was these teenagers were at a mosh pit slam dancing. We didn't learn more about that than I ever thought I would. But basically, the dance was they were fussing and fighting and bouncing into each other. One of them received a head injury and spent several months in Spain Rehabilitation Center trying to learn to walk, chew food, all those things.
Wow. And
we brought in an expert to come in, not only talk about his brain injury, but the dangerous nature of that particular type of dance. And the Who's safety manager came in to testify with regard to what type of dance it is. And I hope they don't do it anymore. But,
wow.
But it was part of it.
Wow.
And so you not only have to have medical testimony, but how did the head injury occur? Was there liability there? Was this an accident? Was it part of the dance? And it's all those questions have to be answered.
Let's talk a little bit